Exact values part 2. So assuming you've watched the first video, you should have an idea of how we can find the exact values for trig functions for certain values between 0 and 90. And those values are 0 and 90, and between them 30, 45 and 60. So the question is, can we find some that are greater than 90? And also, can we find some that are less than 0? In other words, can we find some negative ones? Well, let's start with some bigger than 90, sine 150. Now, the way we're going to tackle exact values bigger than 90 is we're going to use the CAST diagram in a slightly different way to the way we do when we solve equations to get this to be one of our 30, 45, 60 angles. So I'm going to draw a CAST diagram. And I need to know for this that a CAST diagram has a 0 at the right. Okay, so there's 0 degrees when you look at a CAST diagram. And you go anti-clockwise. So there's 0 up to 90 is the first quadrant. That's why we call it first quadrant. The second quadrant here goes from 90 to 180. 180 to 270, so we're going up in 90 every time. Third quadrant is here. And the fourth quadrant, 270 to 360, is here. So if I'm given 150 degrees, I then know that that's 0 to 90, 90 to 180. It's somewhere in here. Okay, somewhere in this quadrant here between 90 and 180. Now, next thing I need to think of is what is the instruction in this quadrant here? Well, it's 180 take away x is the instruction that you get for this quadrant. So what I want to do now is I want to kind of equate these two things. 180 take away x, what if I wanted that to be 150? What would I need x to be to get that to 150? So I would approach this as a mental process. So I would need to take away 30. So there we go. Sine 150 is sine 30. Now at this stage, the only thing that can change is that perhaps it's actually the opposite and it's a negative instead of a positive. Perhaps the sign is going to change here. Now the way you check that is, if you're looking at sine, are we looking in the sine quadrant? And yes, we are. 150 is in the sine quadrant. So if the trig function that you've got, sine, agrees with the trig function of the quadrant you're in, then you do not need to change the sign. So this is going to stay positive, it's going to stay as sine 30, which we know is a half. Okay, so we've evaluated sine 150 as a half. So let's do the same for cos 225. So I want a CAST diagram. I want to find where 225 is, 0, 90, 180. It's going to be in here somewhere. I want to have a little think about the instruction for this quadrant. That's 180 degrees plus x, and a bit of mental maths. What would go with 180 to make 225? It would be 45 degrees. So I change this to 45 degrees. Now, I need to remember my 4 is still sat there in front multiplying. And the final thing is, am I going to change the sign to make it from a positive to a negative? And what do I need to check? Well, I'm dealing with the cos trig function, and let's have a look at the quadrant I'm in. This is not the cos quadrant, so that tells us that this is going to flip. Okay, these two things, cos and tan, they are not the same. So I'm going to actually get minus 4 cos 45 instead of just 4 cos 45. So cos of 45 is 1 over root 2. And what I'm now going to do is just multiply by minus 4. Only multiply the numerator when you're multiplying by a whole number. So that gives us minus 4 over root 2. And let's try one last one. CAST diagram. Now, if you haven't checked out radians yet, then I suggest you do that before you maybe come back to listen to this one. 5 pi over 6, that's given in radians. So what I want to do is I want to change that into degrees. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to go to the side of my page. Well, what I do is I want to get rid of radians, get rid of pi, and I introduce degrees. So times by 1/2 over pi, cancel the pi sign, divide by 6. 5/30 is 150, and 1 times 1 is 1. So I get 150 degrees. So first thing is, before I'm even going to use my CAST diagram, this is the same as asking what is minus 1 of tan 150 degrees. So 150 degrees is back in this quadrant. Now, my instruction in this quadrant is 180 plus x. So that means that, sorry, it's not, it's take away x. So that means that in this case, 180 take away what is 150? The answer is 30. So this becomes minus 3 tan 30. What do I need to check? Well, I need to check that usual thing. Does my trig function agree with my quadrant? So my quadrant is sine and my trig function here is tan. If they don't agree, okay, tan's positive down here, not up here. So I need to flip the sign. So it was a negative, the sign's going to flip to become a positive, 3 tan 30. Okay, or I could just ditch that altogether. So what's tan 30? Well, tan 30 is 1 over root 3. So this becomes 3 times 1 over root 3, which is 3 over root 3. Okay, there we go. That's how to find the exact values over 90. So what I'm going to do in a second is look at less than 0 degrees. So now we're going to look at what if the angle we want to evaluate, the sine or cos or tan of, is less than 0, so a negative value. Also, what about if it's greater than 360 degrees? So quite a few steps to each of these. We don't come up all that often, but we'll take a look at them anyway. I'm going to skip a few steps in the working, so if there's anything you want me to explain in more detail, just let me know, and I can do that either in the comment section, in a follow-up video, or in class. So first of all, minus 30. So what I want to ask myself is, I'm going to put a little arrow here. Minus 30 is like, instead of going round this way like a cast diagram does, it's like just going 30 degrees backwards, this way, down this way. Okay, and if we think of a cast diagram, it's like going down into a cos quadrant there. So I always want to work going this way around like my cast diagram goes. So if I'm given minus 30, what I want to know is, what would that be the same as going round in the positive direction instead of going minus 30? And what I really want to know is what goes with 30 degrees to make 360 a full turn, and that's 330 degrees. Okay, so if you start here and go 330 degrees in the positive direction, that would be exactly the same as going 30 degrees in the negative direction. So sine of minus 30 is the exact same as sine 330. Now what do I need to do now? Well, I need to do a cast diagram. A few shortcuts I'm going to take here. If I was to draw a cast diagram, I would find that the value would be 30, and I would find that it needs to be negative. Okay, I suggest you draw this out yourself and see if you agree with this. If I've made a mistake, you can let me know. Minus sine 30, which is minus a half. So, same idea here, only this time it's in radians. So first step is like last time, change this into radians. Pause the video now if you want to give it a try and see if you get it. And what I get is that cos minus 7 pi over 6 is the same as cos minus 210 degrees. So once I've got that, I'm going to do the same idea, which is to say, go in 210 degrees in the wrong direction, you could say, in the negative direction. What's that the same as going in the right direction, the positive direction? What goes with 210 to make 360? It's 150 degrees. So cos minus 210 is the same as cos 150 degrees. So what we're going to do now is cast diagram. We would find that the value is 30. We would find that we do need to flip it to make it minus cos of 30. And that gives us a value of minus 1 over root 2. Okay, so that's how to deal with less than 0. What about greater than 360? Because if you think about it, where does 390 fit on the cast diagram? Well, what I want you to imagine is 390 means going around a full 360 degrees and then an extra 30. So that's 390 degrees. You've gone away a whole 360 plus an extra 30. That's exactly the same as just going 30 degrees. And then again, another quick way to get that is, if it's more than 360, simply take away 360, and whatever you're left with, that's what you're going to find instead. Okay, so instead of tan 390, I'm going to find tan 30. This time this can go straight into my exact values. I don't need a triangle, sorry, I don't need a cast diagram here, so that's going to give me 1 over root 3. Okay, less than 0, Okay, you need to figure out what the other way around would be. And greater than 360, think about going around more than once or just take away 360 degrees.